just one more thing to say about the neocolonialism and Barack Obama. If you look at what was done to Libya, I understand that yes, Libya is a country that needs to change its leader. Like, why would you be a leader for that long, right? But the way it was done was very wrong. You removed someone. There was no clear path on succession. Now
we are still feeling the effects right now.
Slaves have been sold. Black people have been sold as slaves for as low as $40. Do you know what that means? And Boko Haram members will go to Libya to re-strategize, to reclaim, and they will come back and terrorize both Chad and Nigeria.
They're even using it as a way of illegal arms trade. They are bringing in weapons from Libya.
That's the market.
Yeah, that's how they do their.
So influencing, even meddling in another country's politics is also a strong way that neocolonialism has strived and continues to strive.
Good point. And I think thinking about Afghanistan, thinking about Iraq, thinking about Syria, the same thing that you mentioned, it has played out. And we see how destabilized the region is, for example. You see Afghanistan, the Taliban has even gained control of that country. So it begs the question, like, what was the point?
We do not support Taliban.
We
do not support Islamic people coming to say they want to take over the whole region and enforcing. But still, if you're going to meddle in another country's politics or form of governance, then there has to be a clear path to ensure that there is stability in that region, because you're coming to play as an external force in that region.
So that they should have at least clearly itemized every step.
And talk about it. Do you understand?
But I think the reason why they may not think that long term is because of they don't want to be labeled as neo-colonialist, right? In the sense that if you are already planning and shaping the future of a country, that's always the colonization already.
They are already. There's no need for them to like sugarcoat what they are.
All
right.
They are already.
They are.
But
we'll still talk about economics too. But I want us to look into the African Bank of Nigeria. I said of Nigeria, sorry. African Development Bank.
We talk about that. But one thing they will say as well when they talk about, like, maybe through neocolonialism displacing some governments, they will say that some of these governments are authoritarian governments. They do not care for the rights of the citizens. Some of them may be corrupt, blah blah blah. You get, so they make a justification basically for them
for
having
their
to
actions.
Intervene in those situations.
Totally understandable.
How will you balance, trying to dissuade any form of neocolonialism and the fact that sometimes these countries may say, or they will portray that they are trying to make some form of positive change for the world.
I feel, for example, the Council of Foreign Relations in the US is a think tank. So they recently had like a roundtable discussion. So they had people from outside the US. So they had Benga Oyebode, who is like a very senior lawyer from Nigeria, like the MD, was formerly chairman of Aluko and Oyebode, is like a law firm. They had the CEO of one of the biggest logistic companies from, I think, Kuwait. So they had the former Prime Minister of New Zealand and Ivanka from Brazil. And they were asking them, what does the outside world think about the US? And the overwhelming answer was that most other countries were thinking that the US were retreating from their countries in terms of investment, in terms of supporting infrastructure. You see what China did with the Belt Road Initiative. That's what we want in most countries. Leave the people to decide their leaders. Leave the people to, if we saw what happened with the Arab Spring and how people in Tunisia, for example, changed their leaders. In Egypt, they did the same thing. So people should be left to decide what kind of leaders they have. They might be authoritarian, all right, but meddling in other people's countries, always. I've not seen any country that their politics was meddled in that succeeded. There's none.
I would like to come in and go ahead. Right? See, you cannot just. There are some leaders that are dangerous.
Yes.
Please let us not forget that. There are some leaders that are dangerous, and we know that they are to go. Gaddafi was a very dangerous leader.
Yes, he was.
Gaddafi also sponsored some form of terrorism.
Yes.
Do you understand? Apart from that, there are some other African leaders that are spending years there and don't want to leave. Do you understand? I really believe that those people should leave. People should be able to elect their leaders.
Yes.
But I don't believe that democracy is the only form of governance that will make most sense. But still, people should be able to vote in their leaders. And coupled with the fact that if people are under severe torture or severe hardship because of leaders' policies and leaders' decisions, but still, there should be a way that these leaders will be called out. But all I will say is that if you're going to come and interfere in another country's politics and way of governance, then there should be a clear thought out way on how this situation will pan out, rather than just leave a country in total chaos that will now be a fueling place for terrorists.
But you know, my counter to that is like, it's always difficult. Because say, for example, you are an American government, you probably have an ambassador embedded in the country. They do not understand what it is to be, for example, Sudanese. They do not understand what it means to be Egyptian.
Yes.
So they might have all the best intent, and they might say, oh, in the next 5 years, we want to have an election. They are not going to be the ones to conduct the elections.
Agreed.
They have to have like, oh, the Egyptian election conducting forum. Sure. So what if those Egyptian election forum just decide they want to be corrupt? You can't do anything about it.
Yes.
So, but what we
You might have the good intentions, but you need the locals to actually take it upon themselves. Like we saw the same thing with Hosni Mubarak. Hosni Mubarak was president of Egypt for 32 years. It was the longest before his tenure ended. But who ended it? Egyptians. So what I'm saying is that for every change of government, it should be led by the people. Anytime other governments intervene, it doesn't end well.
But when you talk about, I think you make a good point. So, but the Egyptians did overthrow Mubarak, right?
Yes.
But then there was a lot of Western support.
Yes.
Some form of it, especially, it wasn't just Egypt they doing, it was an Arab Spring.
Yeah, the Arab Spring, Tunisia too.
Yeah, Tunisia, Egypt, so many other countries in the Arab
North
world.
Africa,
even Libya eventually happened as well with Gaddafi.
Yes.
So but there was Western influence or some form of Western support, if you want to call it that.
Yes.
That happened in that regard. So would you also term such a thing like a neo-colonialist effort, or would you say it was more like a indigenous-led action that the Western government now supported?
Yes.
Or do you feel like they instigated it?
Now, I do not know the details of how like everything happened.
Yeah.
But the part I know was that there were protests.
Yeah.
Massive protests in those countries. It started from Tunisia and then it spread into other countries.
Yeah.
Now, the foreign governments supported those movements because they felt like, oh, the governments were authoritarian, they needed to go. But one thing they didn't do that they did in Libya was they didn't directly like influence it by like sending military actions and attacking those countries.
You know that NATO was on ground during Libya takeover.
I don't think it was a significant.
It was significant because the UK, Australia, Germany,
but
US and Canada.
If you are going to examine that Libya situation, okay, like look at, you talked about Mubarak. When the people protested and there was like a revolution of some sort, Mubarak stepped down.
Yes,
right? He did. Gaddafi wasn't willing to step down.
Agreed.
Yeah.
He perceived the revolution to be Western sponsored against him particularly.
Also using chemical
and then
weapons.
he used a lot of high-handed tactics as well against the Libyan people as well. He was in I think it was the eastern part of it, I think Benghazi.
Yes.
And then there are some of the supporters that were in the
Tripoli.
Tripoli, right? Yeah, the capital. So I think there was a form of like I don't know, maybe like an international
there was like a civil war.
Something like a civil war, exactly. So he felt that they were manipulating those guys against him, and he didn't want to live on that behalf. He didn't feel like it was the country itself that was doing that.
And
so in that situation,
bad leader.
I would say, well, that was why he was wrong in that. He was wrong in that.
He's a bad leader because he prioritizes his own.
But
this thing above.
Was he prioritizing his own interest? I don't think he was prioritizing his own interest per se.
Oh yeah, it was.
It was, but it was more nuanced. It was nuanced in the sense that he felt that it was stirred up, like it was instigated. It wasn't like, he didn't feel like it was an organic movement.
That was not the first time they wanted Gaddafi out.
Yeah. So, but now my question is basically is that in a situation where the people are trying to push for the overthrow of a authoritarian government or a government basically, and the government decides to use high-handed tactics like we saw in Libya, would there be any justification for like a neo-colonialist effort like what we saw in Libya with NATO and the US intervening and all of that? Will you say that that would be justified in that regard?
For me,
Yeah.
I think that if there is going to be a neo-colonialist influence in a political space of another country, whatever they are going to do, let there be a well thought out plan. Do you understand?
Yeah.
Because as time goes by and as the thing becomes more serious and dangerous, there will be need for people to intervene. Let me give you a very simple example. Look at Iran now. The supreme leader of Iran, if some people stands up and say, oh, they want to take him out of power, oh, you've been there for too long, right? And they start gaining people and they start fighting him, there's possibility that they might use weapons and dangerous tactics against those people.
Yeah.
They can come in and say, okay, we want to help those people. US, UK, they cannot come in and say, we want to help those people. But it is important for them to think it out. How do we want this thing to end? You have to look at, you have to look at the end, the long term. You have to start with the end in mind. And not just say, okay, let's just come in. Oh, these people have been oppressed. Let's just go in and fight. By the time they go in and fight, then they destroy the entire country, then destabilize the country. Yeah. Then that's another problem. And we'll still talk more about France and how they
sometimes people even make some allegations that that destabilization is deliberate. It's not just a negligence issue. It's like a deliberate issue. That they deliberately want those places to be destabilized.
Wow.
Right? Look at Saddam Hussein, for example, when he was overthrown in Iraq.
Yeah.
With how the US were able to, pretty much defeat the Iraqi army, they could have decided that, okay, this is how we want to progress going forward. But there was little to no effort in that regard. They simply just left Iraq as it is. Today, now, Iraq is like, there are Iranian proxies in Iraq. There are some US parts that are still occupied by the US, or still have some US military bases. There's Kurdistan militants, fighters there. I think sometimes they feel like when a country is beginning to get too powerful, there are allegations, basically, right, that they deliberately destabilize those countries, make them failed states, basically. So, I don't think the people in the White House are like foolish that they will just make a decision. They won't think about the long term. So sometimes I look into those allegations and I'm like, maybe there's actually some form of deliberation.
We don't know. We can't see.
Yeah. So
but at best they are speculations.
Allegations, allegedly.
Let's put it there.
All right. Yeah. So let's dive it back to Africa, right? Obviously, we've already said that neocolonialism is not only for African countries, right? It happens all over the world as well. But in Africa, there is one form of neocolonialism that has been endemic.
Yes.
It has gone on since the Second World War, since they started giving these countries their independence.
Independence and freedom.
Yeah, and that is France and its former colonies in West Africa. In West and Central Africa, to be honest.